Homesteader of the Rockies, and welcome to the Susie Homesteader channel. And today we're going to be talking about indoor gardening. And it's still February, almost March here in the Rockies, which means nobody's going outside to do any gardening yet. So we're going to try and do a little indoor gardening. And I have some great fun projects for you to do all in your home. A couple of projects we're going to talk about is doing some terrariums. And there's two kinds of terrariums that we're going to do. We're going to do one with a lid and another kind without a lid, using two different kinds of plants. And we'll talk about some houseplant ideas and some fun containers that you can find from just about anywhere to put all your houseplants in. And I'll have some videos for you on seed starting and bulb forcing and regrowing vegetable scraps and sprouts. So we'll have all kinds of fun projects for you. But on part one, I'm going to talk to you today about just starting a terrarium that includes moisture thriving plants, such as these. And these are the ones that you can find at your local nursery or Plantland. And we're going to start with a couple different kinds of containers that you decide to choose from. You can do glass, which is one of my favorites because you can do different layers, and it also helps your kids see how the root systems work. You can do cages. You can still use some open glass containers. You can use toolboxes. You can use old animal feeders, which are fun, rabbit feeders. You can use big shells. You can use wooden dough bowls. Just about anything you can think of to put your terrariums in. But the first kind we'll do is the kind that's going to include a lid. And the reason for that is because it's going to trap most of that moisture and condensation in it. This is also a great horticultural science project to do with your kids. It's real easy to do and real easy for them to understand. So this could be a multi-purpose project for you. The big difference with terrariums and other kinds of plants is that there is usually no drainage for your plants, unless you have maybe something that's wood and you have a tray underneath it for the holes to be made. But the way you're going to get around the drainage problem is by getting some rocks. Now these rocks I bought just at a craft store, if you can believe that. But if you don't have any at a store, go outside and dig some up. And pea gravel is another nice one. Just try and keep your rocks really small, because the smaller the better, and then the better the drainage. So your first layer in your terrarium will be some small rocks. And then your second layer is going to be some charcoal. And again, you can buy this by the bag at a nursery. Or if you have some charcoal outside from an old burn pile you made, and as long as it's just wood ash and not from a barbecue with briquettes or chemicals, you can actually use your own charcoal if you just break it up small enough. And that will be your second layer. And then your third layer in your terrarium is going to be sheet moss. And again, you can buy this at a nursery. You can also buy it at a craft store. And if you do not have that in a store and you think you might have some outside, which I always have tons of, especially right after the snow melts, then try and find some moss that's nice and thick, because you're really just looking for kind of a layer, a nice solid layer to keep your soil from seeping through. So this will be your fourth layer, and for the moisture thriving plants, you just want to use some potting soil. I don't recommend really using just outside dirt, because this has lots of things to help aerate your plants in it. So just try and get a bag of potting soil for that. And then when we go to our other video on doing succulents, you will need a different type of soil, and this is a cactus mix, which generally just means it's a little bit grittier and it might have sand in it, which is what your succulents use for those kind of terrariums. So a few different kinds of soils that you can work with. And then as soon as you get your last layer of soil in, then you can actually go and put in your terrarium plants. And these are just a couple examples that I picked up at the nursery. And this one is called a strawberry begonia. This is called a stilt peperomia. Let's see, we have some baby tears, a butterfly plant. This is kind of almost like a ground cover. This one I don't know. This one is a lemon butter fern. And this is a ruby red Selaginella. So just the fern family. And ferns are great because they really like the moisture. So there's a nice little array of plants that you can use in your terrarium. And then your next question, which is really the trickiest on your terrarium, is going to be how to water them. And there's a couple different methods. The first one would be if you could get a watering can with a really small, long spout to get just down to the dirt and kind of beyond the leaves. That's the best idea. And if that doesn't work, you can use a spray bottle. And again, you're trying to spray the soil more than the plant itself because you're trying to keep your soil moist. And here's another good one, and that is just a turkey baster. You know, just fill that up and kind of spot water your plants, and particularly the ones that might need it more than others. So there's a couple ways to water your terrarium. And another tool I like to use is just a nice little paintbrush, because this is good for kind of tamping your soil down after it's wet and kind of just brushing off dirt and using it to kind of place your items in your terrarium, because it's actually very hard to you know, have all those little tiny things in one container, and little tiny hands work better than big hands. But a paintbrush or anything you can use just to kind of push things down is a good idea to have. And, you know, you can add all kinds of fun little pieces, you know, little metal gazebos and little fence pieces, or any kind of like little trinkety items you can find at a thrift store, you know, houses, you name it, all kinds of little odds and ends that you could just let your daughter find, I'm sure, in a thrift store. If you give her a basket, she'll come home with all kinds of fun little things. So, you know, create any kind of fun theme you want in your terrarium. I like to use Lazy Susans for a lot of my gardening projects, because you can rotate this in the sunlight if you need to. And, you know, just kind of little wooden stands or different displays that you might want to put your containers on are always fun. And just make sure this is, especially with the lid, this is somewhat in indirect sunlight, because if you're going to put this in direct sun, it's pretty much going to cook your plants. So if you start to notice too much condensation, or you overwatered your terrarium, which is a really bad idea, and you start seeing puddles in the bottom, you know, just take your lid off, and then you can maybe put it in some direct sun just to dry out some of the moisture that you have in there. But if you get it too hot, well, your plants are pretty much just going to die. So don't overwater, and you can take the lid off if it looks like it's just getting too moist in there, or maybe even you're getting mold, which can happen as well. If you don't have indirect sunlight available, you can do the grow lights, or just a grow light bulb, and just make sure that your plants are under there for maybe 12 hours a day or less, and that will make up for natural light. And if they get too big in your jar, especially if you have the lid, you can prune them, and just use some scissors to prune your plants. And you do not need to fertilize anything in a terrarium, because it kind of creates its own indoor ecosystem. The only other problem you might have with a terrarium is gnats. And I know I have tons of them. Even though we live in a very dry climate, they'll sneak in here. And the best way to deal with that is to spray a really mild, like a citronella bug spray, or just anything on the lid that's not too concentrated, And then just don't spray it inside your terrarium. Just put it on the lid and get your lid back on, and that should get rid of your bugs. So you might see some gnats because that really is a perfect environment for bugs. So that does happen. And if you can, use distilled water instead of hard water, unless you have a water softener system like I do. But in the Rockies we have some super hard water full of calcium and iron. And sometimes that's a little hard on the smaller plants too. So distilled water is better, but you don't have to use it. Just, keep an eye on how your plants are doing and use your own judgment. So that is kind of all you need to know for a moisture thriving terrarium. And then we'll see you on part 2, where we're going to talk about how to do a succulent terrarium, which is a whole different process, because these plants right here are going to want more light and less moisture. So you have a different growing environment for 2 kinds of varieties of plants. And I will show you that on part 2 on how to do a succulent terrarium. So we'll see you there. Bye-bye. So let's get started. Subscribe to the Susie Homesteader channel, and we'll see you there. Bye-bye.